What the heck is happening to Hextech? Well, I think I know. You see, the writers of Arcane like to do a lot of misdirection. Act 1 is making us believe that it's the overuse of Hextech that's causing the corruption. Now, I think I have enough information to make the claim that it wasn't overuse that caused the problems, but something else entirely. To find out what that is exactly, someone very unexpected is the key, Heimerdinger. Back in his flashback of the war caused by magic, there were some key visuals that we just can't ignore. Also, since science is very much integrated into Hextech, there's going to be some sciencey stuff to better explain what's happening. Also, I'll be leaving the biggest question at the end, so I hope you can catch that. If you recall, Hextech is just channeling magic through these blue crystals and installing them in equipment that have runes engraved on them to define what they're supposed to do. That's basically how Hextech is supposed to work. But like I mentioned, it's being implied that the overuse of Hextech is now causing a kind of negative reaction. We can see this when Ekko shows Jayce the leaves of the tree. Jayce claims that they've tested the way Hextech works without any negative results. When he asks Heimerdinger's advice, he tells his student that whenever magic is used, something twisted always happens afterwards. That's when they introduce the concept of the wild runes. As of now, the wild runes are just a theory based on Viktor's research. It's essentially the response that magic gives when they're ordered to do stuff. Pretty relatable, right? They tend to happen where the wall between the arcane and reality is at its thinnest. The psychedelic patterns on the tree are initially thought to be patterns of the wild runes. These are the same patterns they found when they were trying to experiment with the Hexcore and the plants. The plants died, of course, which puts a bit of stake with what's happening with Ekko's tree now because there's a time limit to save it. Now, it's not only the tree that has the patterns on it. The tree of Jayce, Heimerdinger, and Ekko travel down to the Hexcore mesh or the foundation of the hex gates. There, they find the same kind of corruption on the floor near the core. Since this is located near the source of water for the Undercity, the corruption seems to have made its way there, corrupting the tree in Ekko's base. Not long after they found it, the core goes wild and takes them on the trip. The pattern is still there, and it's still being implied that these are wild runes. The thing is, we don't know what wild runes are yet. Yes, they're being set up, but we actually don't know what they look like or what they can do. Again, I'll come back to that later on, but I do think that Ekko and the firelights will have something to do with that. If the patterns we're being shown aren't really wild runes, then what are they? In episode 3 of the first act, we finally see what Caitlyn saw in the records of her family, the Grey. We hear Cassandra Kiraman explaining that the rise of industry in the fissures has led to the air becoming increasingly toxic. This led her to make a ventilation system to drive the air out. In those same records, we see that there have been accounts of the Grey that seem to have been taken from a long time ago. We see that the Grey has contaminated many people, mutating them and destroying their bodies. In fact, the mutation seems very familiar. It looks like the corruption of the Hexcore. In these pictures, you can see those same patterns, and it's the same as those we see in Piltover. Now, that's not the worst part. There's something more sinister at play here. Let me explain. For some reason, the vents were blocked off. Now, this was a project of Cassandra Kiraman. I don't believe that it was a power play to not get the vents open or anything. If that were it, why would they use such resources to do something good? Get it done and never use it. This was finished, but it was never opened. You have to ask, what was the reason why they never opened it? Now, this green stuff, aptly called the Grey, has been set up ever since the first episode, right before it even hit the 20-minute mark. You can see it as Vi, Powder, Milo, and Clagor descend into the Undercity, and it was covered with a green miasma that caused people to wear masks or get sick. Okay, so right here, it's the writer setting something up, and it's in the first episode. That means it's big, really big. Since the miasma, or the Grey as we know it now, is causing sickness and disease in the people of the Undercity, a lot of them have been corrupted by the Grey. One very notable individual is Viktor. This Viktor part was set up in the second episode of the second act of the first season. It was when Jayce was auditing the hex gates, and Viktor had this very wild coughing fit. Blood from his nose dripped into the Hexcore mesh as we discover in the second season. In the first season, it was very negligible, but this did mark the time that something started talking to Viktor. It was instructing him to shape the Hexcore into something else. This is the first trigger of the corruption. It also connected Viktor and all the contamination to the Hexcore mesh of the hex gates. How? Well, since the Grey is what's causing the disease in the people of the Undercity, Undercity, there's already a small amount of it in Viktor's blood. Since the blood came into contact with the Arcane, I believe it began to mobilize, seeing a chance to meet its goal. Another trigger point was when Mel and Jayce were doing the hanky-panky, and Viktor had another coughing fit and spit out more blood. This happened in episode 5 of the first season. The corrupted Hexcore was gaining more momentum as it got more blood and more of the gray in it. The next we see Viktor with the Hexcore that was corrupted. He seemed to be trapped in the Hexcore's world. The Hexcore was reacting wildly and it tries to absorb him. The next time we see them, they begin experimenting with the Hexcore and plants. This is where we get to see the same patterns on the plants as with Ekko's tree. Plants are dying because they're rejecting the transmutation. So this is when they bring in Heimerdinger and he sees what he saw all those years ago. Again, this is another key visual, so take note of this. The third trigger was when Viktor went all in with the runes and the shimmer. This was in episode 7 of the first season, and he injected himself with shimmer, wounded himself, and fed his blood directly to the Hexcore. This is when things turned wild. Both he and the Hexcore changed. Viktor became half a Terminator, while the Hexcore looked more and more like the corrupted ball of psychedelics we see in season 2. The second to the last trigger was when Viktor ran out of shimmer and just decided to give out his blood instead. This was the most change that Viktor and the Hexcore experienced, at least in the first season. The final trigger for their evolution was when Jayce tried to save Viktor by using the Hexcore when it reacted to Viktor. This completed their mutation and evolution, especially since through context, we see that the corrupted Hexcore wanted all of Viktor in the first place. He's wrapped in a cocoon-like substance that is, again, patterned in the way the corruption is. Whenever anybody tries to touch the cocoon, it reacts almost as if trying to consume the one approaching it as well. So, what does this all mean? If you'll notice what the Kiramans have studied and all the illustrations in their infographics show, the nature of the mutation and the corruption inside the human bodies that they studied almost exactly match the corruption of the Hextech. Again, they built the ventilation system only to never use it for the long term. That means that there's something really that caused it to stop. In my humble, nerdy opinion, I think the reason they chose to imprison the gray in the ventilation system is because it had a face. Also, if you would notice, when Caitlyn and their strike team used the gray to assault the Chem Barons and their group, the smoke is hissing and whispering stuff. That all seems very suspicious if you ask me. Another point to consider is that when Amara attacked Tambessa, she told her that they knew what she was chasing in Piltover and that they will not allow it. Given this, what has Ambessa been pushing since she came to Piltover? War with the Undercity. Where is the gray located? The Undercity. She knows about the gray and its nature. And you know what? She wants it to get revenge on the Black Rose. And I doubt you've checked my channel out before, so I'll tell you this. The Black Roses are powerful mages, so if they're afraid of whatever the gray is, it's got to be big. You know, with wild runes, we aren't really sure what they are. However, there have been many clues that point to the Firelight's base as one of the areas where the wall between the arcane and reality is thin. First off, they grew a big tree in the Undercity that's full of green miasma that kills people. Second, life seems to grow so easily there. It's not all about the tree. It's almost a direct foil to the experiments of Viktor and Jayce on those plants. To add to this, I think it's Ekko that's going to piece the puzzle of the wild runes together. That's because of the timing of their dialogue with Jayce, in which he said, "I studied what I could and deduced the rest of it." That foreshadowing is as clear as it's going to get. Now, you may ask, given all this, how did Viktor's blood contaminate the Hexcore mesh? Well, again, his blood already had the gray in it because of the gases in the Undercity. The gray inside him seems to have been magnified because shimmer seems to be a concentrated version of it. Now, since a drop of blood is near the Hexcore mesh, it affected the mesh as well. Since Hextech is rooted in science, there's this thing called quantum entanglement. Okay, let me explain. Take a look at my hands. This is my right and this is my left. No matter how far apart they are, they're always connected. So if I put up my pinky, the other one goes up too. And that's supposed to be in real time. So if I put them down, that happens at the same time. If I put up my pointer finger, happens at the same time. Put them down, happens at the same time. And if I put up my thumbs, that's a double thumbs up. So please like and subscribe. So now, since Viktor's blood is now one with the corrupted Hexcore, the blood by the Hexcore mesh is now also fully corrupted. Now, for the key to all of this, the flashback of Heimerdinger. As you can see in the flashback, right at the center of it is a mage. However, if you look around, there is gray smoke all over. This may be what happened back in the days before Piltover. It was the gray that was the enemy and not the mage. That mage may actually be the one that saved Jayce in his flashback during episode 2 battling the gray. So maybe, just maybe, Heimerdinger got it the other way around. Maybe it was magic that saved them from the gray. Now, for the biggest question, why is the gray called the gray if it's color green? Anyway, that's it for me today. Peace and have a great day.